I remember the first time that I saw this really small and beautiful pond in the Dolomites. I was there in 2018 with my regular photo tour that is happening every year. And we were photographing different places in the Dolomites. We're enjoying the landscape, sunrise, sunsets, all the famous places in the Dolomites. I remember one day we were photographing in Paso Gel. And we were looking around and we were photographing Marmolada, for example, and all the famous places that you can see from that location. And while I was looking to my right, I noticed this really small pond. It was a really short drive, a really short hike to get there. But once we got to the location, I realized the sun was higher up in the sky and that morning glow, that morning light was missing. I had to get creative. That's why I suggested to everyone to do a long exposure, to calm the water and to get that movement in the sky. And the resulting photo was f/16, ISO 50, and 162-second exposure. I used a 24mm focal length, and this is the photo. I edited in color version and also a black and white version. You can decide which one you like better. I want to talk about how you're going to plan a long exposure. First of all, you need to find the subject, find the composition, find the perfect light, and make the exposure for that situation. You want to add everything but the ND filter that you're going to use. So in my case, I used a polarizer, and I have a really big one, as you can see. I'm a fan of this square format filter systems. I simply insert the polarizer here and I polarize the scene. And after that, I added a 3 stops ND gradiated filter. The main reason for adding a gradiated filter for this shot was not necessarily the brightness of the sky, but the reflection. Every reflection is 2 to 3 stops darker than the actual element that is being reflected. I did the initial exposure, and after that, I only had a 6-stop ND filter. Now, these days, I have the whole shebang, the whole range of ND filters. I have 3, 6, 10, and 15 stops. So I have all the stops in the world, and back then I only had a 6 stops ND filter. And I place the ND filter as closest as possible in the slot that it's closer to the lens. Now, if you're using a DSLR, you may want to focus before putting the ND filter on, and then you switch the lens to manual focus. If you have a mirrorless camera, it's possible that will focus with no problem. Now, in order to extrapolate from the original exposure to the exposure with an ND filter, I use an app, and with that app, I input the first settings, aperture, ISO, and exposure time, and then I say I want to photograph with an ND filter off, how many stops, and the app gives you the end settings. Now, if the settings are not what you want, for example, the time is too long or too short, you can adjust the final result by opening the aperture or closing the aperture, increasing the ISO, and the exposure time will adjust accordingly. So it's very easy to make these kind of adjustments. And this is very basically how you do a long exposure. If you want to learn more about landscape photography, I have an ebook on my website. I also have some editing courses. I have a course on how to develop your own photographing style in time. So if you're interested in all that, the link is in the description of this video. Until next time, keep on photographing because it's the only way to get better.